My original plan was to make a review explaining why, although I admire what Fame and Misfortune is doing in essence, it utterly fails in its execution, then follow it up with an Under the Lamp episode detailing how this relates to wider issues with the writing that have plagued the current season. But Lily Pete got there first and covered most of what I had planned to say. So in this video I'll be focusing primarily on why it is that ever since the first episode of Season 7 aired, something has felt off. Something has gone wrong with My Little Pony, and it all comes down to a shift in writing philosophy. The problems with Fame and Misfortune can be condensed as follows. The episode calls out garbage criticisms, and one or two valid ones, but unfortunately refutes them with even more garbage that doesn't hold up under any scrutiny, and I'll get onto why in a minute. Like Lily, I believe that the tendency to obsess over insignificant details at the expense of the themes is something that needed to be addressed.
DHX clearly prioritizes themes over everything else. If you're not paying attention to the lessons first and foremost, you're doing it wrong. DHX finds all this nonsense about lore and backstory and continuity and insignificant plot details to be a huge disrespect to their writing, and it is. These are all things I've talked about at length and devoted a huge number of glass of water videos to.
You know, it's funny how a good critic or analyst can take everything you've been thinking but struggling to put into words and express it so eloquently, but then that is their job. Meanwhile, a lesser critic might feel something is amiss but cannot explain why, and so will default to some surface-level observation that simply does not get to the root of the problem. Talking of which, GameLink Reviews made a 5-minute review of Triple Threat, which amounted to, it's boring, and cliche, and it's boring.
This episode didn't give me anything to work with, no material to make fun of or praise, nothing happened.
He's not the first MLP analyst to pull this kind of stunt, and all I can say is there's a reason I only choose topics I have something substantial to contribute to. So let's do what GameLink should have done and actually break down why it is boring. A well-told story will always have a conflict, something that is at stake to hook the audience in and make them care. In this case, the conflict hinges on keeping Thorax and Ember apart, and we are encouraged to empathise with Spike's fears that if they meet there'll be a dragon and changeling war or whatever. The trouble is, it's obvious from a mile away that Spike is getting worked up over nothing. Therefore, not only is the plot device cliché, but more importantly, there's nothing at stake, no reason to care about what's happening. This is how to fail at writing 101. I suppose you could argue that children, the core demographic of the show, might be immature enough to go along with Spike's concerns, but considering DHX devoted an entire episode to attacking criticisms made by adults, it's doubtful whether satisfying their core demographic is particularly high on their agenda right now. The reality is it's symptomatic of a deeper issue, that being a conscious disregard for the very craft of storytelling. One of Fame and Misfortune's rebutals, rightly dismissed by Lily Pete, was the "we're not flawless" argument.
Maybe the argument that the characters aren't flawless would have worked if it wasn't also the go-to response for uncritical douchebags who get mad when someone says their favorite show isn't perfect. We as critics have had a very long time to think about why this response doesn't mean anything and why the people who make it are idiots.
It's strange that they should be making a point about this at all, since the critics never took issue with characters having flaws, or at least those of us with our wits about us didn't. It's flawed writing that we take offence to, and this is it at its most extreme. Such a fundamental misunderstanding suggests the writers don't even recognise the difference between reality and fiction. It's almost as if they think we are attacking their characters on a personal level, like they are real people. But that would be ridiculous. I mean, DHX are a team of professionals, right?
My character? We are real ponies. This journal is a record of things that actually happened to us.
Okay. This line. Where to begin? Firstly, no, they are not real. That's the whole point. If fiction really resembled real life, it would be boring. That's why, as a writer, your job is harder than God's. It's one of the first things you should learn. Secondly, trying to state your characters are real only draws attention to the fact that they are not real and breaks any suspension of disbelief. But what do these writers care? They've already blatantly given the middle finger to the basic principles of their medium. It all goes back to that mediocre first episode, which apart from feeling like 20 minutes of filler, decided to blow the tiny bit of dramatic potential it did have with a confused and anticlimactic ending.
I'm not ready to leave! Oh good, because I'm not ready for that either. Here, I got you this present. It was going to be a congrats on getting a Medal of Honor present, but then I was afraid it would have to be a going away present, but now it's I couldn't be happier stay present.
This is the moment DHX decided once and for all that they were above conventional storytelling, that 3-act structure and inciting incident were dirty words. You can subvert the established formula up to a point, but at the end of the day, as a professional writer, it is still your Bible, and saying our characters are flawed just like real people does not excuse you from that. But it's not like the writing team are incapable of telling engaging stories, and clearly they still do on occasion. They just need to get their heads into gear, stop trying to be so postmodern, and get back to focusing on what they are good at. I'm Midnight Chimes, the pony of cheap references to better-known reviewers. Don't forget to keep analysing, you just might end up right. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's worth a shot.